FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
I think that most Afghans that I talk to support the U.S. presence in Afghanistan right now, and have from the beginning. And that I think their main fear is to go back to the civil war of the 1990s, when the Soviets pulled out and the US also pulled out in every way. I think that's the main fear. That was the worst time for most of the country, worse than the Soviet invasion itself, I think. So I think there have been surveys done, and I'm not sure that people are aware of this. They want the US to stay and to help them build the country, and they basically want assistance, but they don't want to be controlled.
And they're afraid that the U.S. might just pull out.
Yes, I think that that's a fear, that if the soldiers leave and the consultants leave, then it's going to resort back to civil war, or we're going to have the Taliban back. And some of them actually prefer the Taliban to what they have right now, because they did secure the country. There was this one unified voice. However, that shows you how desperate Afghans are, because the Taliban did not provide economic opportunities. They did not provide specific freedoms. I mean, the country had reverted back to medieval times. And although maybe many Afghans in rural parts agree with their way of life or way of thinking, I would say that in the urban centers where progression takes place, they don't. And I don't think, especially women, again, they want to go back to that. So I think it's very important for Americans to know how much Afghans depend on this effort. And the difference between Iraq, I worked in Iraq and I worked in Afghanistan, it's a huge difference. You can't even compare the situation, the terrain, the people. They're both Muslim countries, but that's about where the similarities end. I mean, the tribal structure in Iraq is still there. It's a very successful structure. In Afghanistan, it's been broken apart by years of war. Afghanistan is much less educated than Iraq. The terrain in Afghanistan is rocky mountains, where you have flatlands in Iraq. So you have to think of all the differences before you can compare the two and understand the histories of each country. But I think that it is important for us to understand the distinction between controlling a country and helping a country. And I think that's what Afghans want people to know, is that they don't want to be occupied, and they don't consider the US being there an occupation. Again, from the places that I went to, and I've traveled pretty much everywhere except for the eastern part of the country. But in Iraq, they did consider it an invasion from day one. So that was a big difference in how people think of this intervention, should we say, to keep it neutral.